James Cameron's Titanic is one of the most expensive, ambitious, and celebrated films ever made. Released in 1997, it swept the Academy Awards, broke box office records, and made audiences around the world fall in love with a story set against one of history's greatest tragedies. Cameron was obsessed with authenticity. He dove to the actual wreck site, consulted historians, hired specialists, and spent hundreds of millions of dollars trying to recreate the grandeur and heartbreak of April 1912. The result was a cinematic masterpiece that still holds up decades later. But here's the thing about perfection. It is almost impossible to achieve, especially when you are managing thousands of crew members, shooting on massive practical sets, working with early computer-generated imagery, and editing millions of feet of footage into a 3-hour film. Mistakes happen. And in Titanic, some of those mistakes are so glaring that once you see them, you cannot unsee them. Others are more subtle, buried in historical inaccuracies that only reveal themselves when you dig a little deeper into the actual record of 1912. So sit back, because we're going through this legendary film scene by scene, blooper by blooper. Some of these will make you laugh. Some will genuinely surprise you. And a few will make you question how a film so carefully crafted could let these slip through the cracks. Let us start with one of the most physically obvious bloopers in the entire movie. There's that unforgettable scene where Jack is handcuffed to a pipe in a flooding room, and Rose has to race against time to free him using an emergency axe. It is one of the tensest moments in the film, and Kate Winslet plays it brilliantly. But if you watch the moment she swings the axe down toward the handcuff chain, something deeply strange happens. The head of the axe visibly bends on impact, not slightly. It flops, almost comically, like something you'd see in a cartoon or children's play. The reason is completely understandable from a production standpoint. The axe was made of rubber, a standard safety precaution when stunt work involves weapons near actors. No real steel axe was ever going to be swung near Leonardo, DiCaprio's wrists on a film set. But the problem is that the rubber was never supposed to show that clearly on screen. For just a moment, the illusion completely breaks, and instead of a desperate survival tool, the axe looks like a toy prop from a Halloween store. It is a small moment, but once you notice it, it is genuinely difficult to take the scene as seriously as you did before. Right before the rubber axe moment, there's another blooper that plays out in that same emergency box sequence. Rose smashes a glass panel on the fire emergency box to retrieve the axe, which is a perfectly logical thing to do in a sinking ship emergency. The glass shatters. She grabs the axe. The scene moves forward, but then the camera cuts. And if you are watching closely, a significant portion of that glass panel appears to have magically repaired itself. There is no explanation, no second breaking sound, no shot of it being replaced. It simply goes from shattered to partially intact between 2 consecutive cuts. This is a classic continuity error caused by shooting scenes across multiple takes or on different days. A prop gets reset for another angle. Someone forgets to break it again, and suddenly your shattered glass is looking suspiciously whole. In a calmer, slower scene, an editor might catch something like that. But in the middle of a flooding, chaotic sequence, it is easy to see how it slipped through. Here is another continuity error from that same flooding room sequence, and it involves Jack's wardrobe making an unauthorized change in the middle of a life-or-death situation. In one shot, Leonardo DiCaprio is clearly wearing his suspenders over his shirt. Standard period-appropriate attire. But the moment the axe comes down and the handcuff chain breaks, those suspenders have vanished entirely. Then, just a couple of shots later, they are back. What happened? The most likely explanation is that the actual breaking of the cuff moment was filmed using a stunt double rather than DiCaprio himself, which is completely common practice in filmmaking. The problem is that when the costume department dressed the stunt performer, no one made sure the suspenders were part of the look. So for just a few frames, Jack's entire upper body wardrobe silently transforms and then transforms back, as if the suspenders had somewhere else to be for a moment. Once you notice it, it is hard not to laugh, because the characters are fighting for their lives, and Jack's suspenders apparently decided it was a good time to take a break. This one requires a sharp eye, but it is genuinely one of the more startling behind-the-scenes bloopers in the entire film. There's a scene where Jack steps into the elegant upper-class section of the ship for the first time. He walks through polished, ornate doors, taking the grandeur of Rose's world. The shot is designed to feel like we are seeing through Jack's eyes, a wide-eyed working-class young man stepping into a place he was never meant to belong. But look at the reflection in the glass door as he enters. Right there in the polished surface, visible if you look for it, is the unmistakable silhouette of a cameraman with equipment. It is not blurred into abstraction or hidden in shadow. It is genuinely there, a human figure holding a camera, reflected in a glass door that Cameron probably assumed would not pick up the crew on the other side. Reflective surfaces are notoriously difficult to control on film sets, and this one clearly caught something it should not have. In a movie that prided itself on period authenticity, the sudden appearance of late 1990s film equipment in a reflection is a genuinely jarring moment. Kate Winslet's Rose is one of cinema's most iconic characters, fiery, intelligent, and visually striking. Part of her look throughout the film is a beauty mark on her face. It becomes part of how audiences recognize her close-up shots. But here's the strange thing. That beauty mark does not stay on the same side of her face throughout the movie. Watch carefully across different scenes. In some shots, the mark is on her right cheek. In others, it appears on her left. This is almost certainly the result of a common editing technique called a film flip, where footage is mirrored horizontally to improve visual flow, match action continuity, or make a cut feel more natural. When you flip footage, everything reverses, including any distinctive facial features. It is a technique editors use without thinking twice most of the time. But when you're dealing with a very visible beauty mark, flipping the image means that mark is going to jump sides between cuts. It is a small thing in isolation, but once you notice it, you'll find yourself watching Rose's face like a detective every time she appears on screen. Here is a blooper that did not come from the editing room or the props department. It came from the sky. In the famous final scenes where Rose floats on debris and stares up at the stars while Jack slips away, the starfield above her is breathtakingly beautiful. It looks perfectly cinematic, a vast, glittering night sky above a tragedy. The only problem is that it is wrong. The night sky shown in that sequence does not match the actual star positions that would have been visible from the North Atlantic in April of 1912. This was not some obscure detail. Neil deGrasse Tyson, the astrophysicist and science communicator, famously pointed this out publicly after the film's release. He contacted Cameron directly, arguing that the stars shown were a random scattering rather than an accurate representation of what that specific sky would have looked like on that specific night. Cameron eventually acknowledged the critique, and for the film's re-release in 3D in 2012, he actually corrected the star field to reflect what the sky truly looked like that night. So technically, there are two versions of this blooper, the original film and the corrected version that came 15 years later. This one is genuinely one of the most surprising anachronisms in the movie, and it hides inside one of the film's most emotionally resonant moments. When Rose is standing at the stern of the ship, clearly in crisis, Jack approaches her and starts talking. He tells her about growing up near Lake Wissota, about ice fishing there in winter, about how cold the water was. It is a beautiful piece of dialogue, grounding and distracting, designed to pull her back from the edge. There is just one problem. Lake Wissota did not exist in 1912. It is not a natural lake. Lake Wissota is a man-made reservoir created when the Wissota Dam was constructed in Wisconsin, and that construction was completed in 1917, 5 years after the Titanic sank. Before the dam was built, there was no lake to fish on. Jack could not have ice fished on Lake Wissota, because Lake Wissota would not be a lake for another 5 years. It is entirely possible this was a simple oversight by the screenwriting team, a location name that sounded right without anyone stopping to verify whether it existed in 1912. But whatever the cause, Jack Dawson's beloved childhood fishing spot was not actually a fishing spot for anyone until well after he supposedly died in the North Atlantic. There is a scene in Titanic where ship officers are searching through the chaos with flashlights. The beams cut to the darkness sharply and brightly, a crisp, cold, white light that looks completely natural to modern audiences. But that specific quality of light is the problem. In 1912, electric handheld torches did exist, but the light they produced was nothing like the clean, bright white beam seen in the film. Early handheld torches used incandescent or carbon filament bulbs, which produce a much warmer, dimmer, yellowish glow, closer in quality to a candle than to a modern flashlight. The sharp, White light shown in the film is characteristic of later LED or halogen technology that would not exist for many decades after the Titanic sank. The production team almost certainly chose to use modern-style lighting equipment because it made the scene more visually legible and dramatic for audiences. But if you are thinking historically, those bright white beams belong to the 1990s, not to 1912. Toward the end of the film, as survivors arrive in New York, we get a glimpse of the Statue of Liberty standing tall and green against the harbor sky. It is a powerful image symbolically, a monument to freedom and new beginnings, welcoming the survivors to their new lives. Visually, it works perfectly. Historically, it does not work at all. When the Statue of Liberty was unveiled in 1886, it was the color of a shiny copper penny, because that is exactly what it was made of, sheets of copper. Over time, copper oxidizes and develops a distinctive green patina called verdigris. That transformation is gradual, taking place over many decades. By 1912, the statue was somewhere in the middle of that process, partially green, partially brownish, streaked and uneven in color. It had not yet achieved a uniform, fully realized green we see in photographs today. The version seen in the film is the fully green, iconic Lady Liberty that audiences in 1997 would immediately recognize. But in April 1912, she would look quite different, a patchwork of copper tones and emerging green, nothing like the pristine image shown on screen. One of the most fascinating details about Rose's character is her collection of modern art. She has pieces on board the Titanic that she treasures, works by artists who were not yet widely celebrated, a sign of her forward-thinking mind and her desire to separate herself from the stuffy traditions of her class. It is a clever piece of character writing. The problem is that some of those paintings were not yet finished.